Are you tired of being called an Oreo? Do you ever feel like your cultural identity has been hijacked by stereotypes? Well, you're not alone. Thousands of people suffer from being called an Oreo every day.
I did hear about
that. But don't worry, now there's an actual solution. Introducing the Oreo Cure. That's right, the Oreo Cure is here to help you reclaim your identity. No more questioning your identity, no more code switching. With the Oreo Cure, you can finally be your true self. Now be quick, folks. I can guarantee you if you order right now, you can get 2, not 1, but 2 for the price of 1.
Holy smokes!
Don't wait. Order today so you can break free from the Oreo stereotype today.
Using Oreo Cure may result in the inability to tolerate narrow-mindedness or cultural gatekeeping. Prolonged use can cause permanent liberation from the Oreo stereotype and may lead to decreased internalized racism in the Black community. The term Oreo may seem harmless at first, a very cutesy and playful jab at who's perceived to be acting too white for a Black person. But guess what? It's not very cutesy and it's not very demure. And definitely not very mindful. The reality is far more complex and frankly damaging. Now, I don't know if kids these days are still getting this insult, but back in my day, Oreo was in full effect. But whether the word is still in use or not, the concepts are still there. When someone is called an Oreo, it's not just about their behaviors or their interests. It's about questioning their identity and their Blackness. It's a term that's loaded with a lot of assumptions about what it means to be Black and who gets to define that. But where did the word come from? Why does it carry so much weight? And how does it affect those that are labeled with it? In this video, we're going to unpack the history and the impact of the word Oreo. We're going to discuss the deeper issues of Black identity and the deeper issue of self-hate and anti-Blackness that this word perpetuates. Now let's dive into a little history lesson. Now, if you don't know what an Oreo is, it's basically a Black person that is visibly Black on the inside, but perceived to be white on the inside, like an Oreo cookie. To truly understand the term Oreo, we have to go back in time and explore the historical roots of racial identity in America. The idea of what it means to be Black in America has been shaped by centuries of systemic racism, cultural oppression, and social expectations. The term Oreo is a product of a long history of racial gatekeeping within and outside the Black community. During slavery, the idea of pure Blackness was already being manipulated. The one-drop rule, which was a social and legal classification, dictated that any person with even one Black ancestor was considered Black. This rule was implemented to maintain racial hierarchy and to enforce the idea that Blackness was a condition to be shamed and avoided. If we can fast forward a little bit to the Harlem Renaissance of the 1920s, the cultural movements of this time were pivotal in redefining the rigid definitions of what it meant to be Black. The artists, writers, and musicians of this era began to redefine what it meant to truly be a Black person in America, which is a beautiful thing. But even within these movements, there were some tensions. For example, figures like W.E.B. Du Bois, who advocated for a talented 10th, which was a leadership class of highly educated Black Americans, often faced criticism from those who felt that such ideas catered too much to white standards.
Now, one of the problems with Du Bois' philosophy was that the talented 10th depended on elitism. And it was that elitism that ate away at everything he tried to accomplish to uplift Black folks.
Another one of Du Bois' concepts, which was double consciousness, which basically means looking at oneself through the eyes of the dominant society, white society, in my opinion, is crucial to understanding the concept of what it means to be an Oreo. This concept really highlights the internal conflict a lot of Black Americans face, the way we reconcile with our own identity and the way others perceive us. If we fast forward a little bit to the Jim Crow era, as we were moving through the decades and fighting for equality, people who tried to assimilate into predominantly white culture or took on traits that were considered to be white could be faced with certain criticisms. Adopting white behaviors or taking on more Eurocentric characteristics in your appearance could have been seen as a way to gain social mobility and protect yourself from the racism. Assimilation was used as a tool of survival, really. However, as we started to film groups like the Black Panthers, for example, many started to put an emphasis on solidarity, having pride in one's culture, and resisting to assimilation. This kind of led to some internal tensions with people that didn't necessarily agree with that concept. This created a rigid boundary around what it meant to be Black for some people. So a lot of times stepping outside of that boundary was met with criticism. And I just want to clarify, I don't think that either side is necessarily wrong to assimilate, to not assimilate. At the end of the day, everybody was fighting for survival. And then as we fast forward into the late 70s, early 80s, as hip hop began to be developed, this genre also became heavily associated with Black culture and what it meant to be Black.
Up and mess up the scene I set. I like to stand in the crowd and watch the people wonder, damn, but think about it, then you're
By the time we reached the late 20th century, early 21st century, the term Oreo had become a shorthand for a very specific type of identity policing. It was used to challenge someone's Blackness based on very superficial criteria. What music they listen to, how they dress, how they do their hair, what career choices they make, how they speak. In Dr. Beverly Daniel Tatum's book, Why Are All the Black Kids Sitting Together in the Cafeteria?, this kind of identity policing can create deep identity scars within a young Black person. It creates a narrow definition of what it means to be Black and can create a divide within the community, where conformity is valued over authenticity. Dr. Tatum explains that the internalized need to prove one's Blackness stems from larger societal pressures that have historically marginalized Black voices and experiences. When society begins to dictate what Blackness should look like, it leaves very little room for individuality and self-expression. So when we talk about the term Oreo, we're not just talking about a playful little nickname. It's a term that's deeply embedded in cultural policing and internalized oppression. Now, having explored the historical roots of what it means to be an Oreo, let's now explore how those roots have grown into a big tree of confusing Black identity concepts. At the heart of the Oreo stereotype, there is this concept of the right and wrong way to be Black. There's often a lot of negative stereotypes about how Black people should look and behave. These concepts are perpetuated in media, education, and everyday life.
Black woman in hindsight.
I told you. What did I tell you? Didn't I tell you? 'Cause I told you. And when did I tell you? A long time ago. And what did I say will happen when I told you? Exactly what just happened.
For example, Black people that speak a certain way are accused of talking white, or Black people that maybe act a certain way or have certain interests are accused of acting white. The concept of respectability politics, I believe, are heavily connected to the term Oreo. Respectability politics are the idea that Black people must adhere to certain behavioral norms to gain acceptance from mainstream, aka white, society. This oftentimes pressures people to conform to ideals that may not align with their own cultural identity. Those who don't conform are labeled as ghetto or ratchet, and those that do are oftentimes labeled as an Oreo or acting white. This creates a no-win situation. If you don't conform, then you're not good enough to succeed in wider society. If you do conform, then you're not Black enough. The Oreo stereotype thrives in this sort of paradox, where our identity as Black people is constantly on trial. The Oreo label is more than just a label. It can actually have deep psychological effects on the mind of the young person being called an Oreo, particularly on young people that are still developing their sense of self. According to Dr. William Cross's Nigrescence theory, which outlines the stages of Black identity development, being labeled as an Oreo can stall or complicate this development. Cross argues that during the encounter stage, the stage where a young person begins to better understand what it really means to be Black in a racialized society, negative experiences can lead to self-doubt and even rejection of one's own identity. According to Cross, people of color are socialized to perceive an unracialized reference frame and are thus resistant to any information that threatens this unracial perspective. In the encounter stage, individuals undergo an experience that suddenly and sharply calls race into perspective and is generally an awakening to racial consciousness. The encounter makes the individual vulnerable to a new racialized worldview. Oftentimes, this occurrence is easily recalled as the first time a child was treated differently because of the color of his or her skin. Now, obviously, I know that this more than likely is in reference to a non-Black person saying or doing something racist to the child, but I can imagine that during this encounter stage, a child being questioned about their identity from other Black people can also have a negative impact on their psyche and the way that they view their own racial identity. So like I mentioned earlier, when we're talking about the Oreo stereotype, we're not just talking about labeling someone or making an offhand joke. It's a powerful form of identity policing within our own community that reinforces harmful stereotypes. It's this concept of like you're either with us or you're against us, when really it's a lot more complex than that. We're stifling our own ability to be individuals and express our own individuality. And in a lot of ways, this is contributing to self-hate and anti-Blackness within our own community. We need to look at the concept of internalized racism. Internalized racism occurs when members of marginalized groups begin to accept the negative lies, myths, and stereotypes perpetuated by the dominant culture against their group. This can manifest as self-hate, where people in that group begin to reject or feel ashamed of their racial identity. The Oreo stereotype is a prime example of how internalized racism can snowball into a deeper issue. By suggesting that certain behaviors, achievements, ways of speech, or interest are inherently white, we're reinforcing the concept that Blackness, what it means to be Black, is limited to a very narrow set of rules. Not only does this devalue how vast and rich our culture truly is, but it perpetuates the notion that anything veering outside of that is inauthentic and therefore not Blackness and not a part of Black culture or the Black community. Let's take music, for example. Think back to when you were in high school and there was that Black kid that was maybe a little bit different. Maybe he was emo. Maybe he listened to rock music, he painted his nails, he did his hair a certain way.
Because tonight will be the night that I will fall for you over again. Don't make me change my mind.
And you may have thought, or someone else may have thought, that guy is weird. Why is he listening to white people music? That's some white people stuff. But in reality, if you really go back and think about it, rock music was originated within the Black community. Although it's often associated with white artists and audiences, it actually has deep roots in Black culture. Its origins can be traced back to the 1940s and 50s, and it drew heavy inspiration from African American genres like blues, rhythm, gospel, etc. Some of the pioneers within rock music were Chuck Berry, Little Richard, Rosetta Tharpe, and many others. And this can be said about many genres of music: techno music, house music, country music. So why are we letting white folks hold claim of things that we really originated? Us participating in these genres of music are us participating in our culture. Dr. Joy DeGruy, in her book Post-Traumatic Slave Syndrome, states that many of the adaptive behaviors that African Americans exhibit, both positive and negative, are reflective of the impact of a legacy of enslavement. There's a great deal of unconsciousness, emotional, and psychological baggage that is passed along from generation to generation. She argues that the trauma of slavery and the subsequent racism that followed has been passed down from generation to generation, resulting in a collective unconscious belief that Black people are inferior, and this therefore manifests in many forms of internalized oppression. When someone is referred to as an Oreo, they're therefore being told that their interests, their perceived intelligence, are somehow like a betrayal of their race in a way, reinforcing that these interests, perceived intelligence, way of speech, whatever it is, cannot be associated with Blackness. It's perpetuating that the two cannot coexist. When the term or concept of someone being an Oreo is perpetuated, we're continuing the idea that Blackness has a certain level of inferiority. If any of you have ever been called an Oreo before, I'm sure you've also heard that followed with,
"You think you better than everybody. You think you smarter than us."
when truthfully, I did not feel that way at all. But I kept getting these comments, or "you want to be white so bad." I truly couldn't understand why people kept placing this label on me that I wanted to be better than, and why they associated what they thought was me acting white or talking white with being better than or thinking that I'm smarter than, when that is the furthest from the truth. I didn't feel that way at all. But obviously, as I've gotten older and done more research on it, I understand that there is this hierarchy where Blackness is put at the bottom of the totem pole and whiteness or white characteristics are put at the top. It's subconscious for most people. Now, clearly, the term Oreo, or the concept of someone being an Oreo, is very dangerous, but I think one of the worst parts about it is that in a lot of people, it can create a sense of self-hate. When someone growing up is constantly told that they are not Black enough, it can create a feeling of alienation and even resentment towards other Black people and their own Black identity. This can manifest in rejecting that Black identity and choosing not to associate with your own community. I know we all know someone or some of those people that they are racially Black, but it's very obvious that they don't identify with that Blackness. They actively reject it, whether they are doing it on purpose or subconsciously. They don't hang out with Black people. They don't like Black music. And although I understand where they're coming from, it could be a defense mechanism. I personally wasn't an Oreo that went in that direction. I went in the complete opposite direction, but I'm not gonna judge them for going down that route. Now, I want to go deeper into the concept of talking white, because I feel like for Oreos, or people called Oreos, growing up in school, talking white was one of the main things that people would bring up as their basis for why we were an Oreo. Now, when people say that a Black person is talking white, or speaking proper is another thing I would hear, they're typically speaking of a Black person that is speaking standard American English. They may be using a certain tone, enunciating their words, using certain pronunciations. This type of speech is often associated with professionalism and higher education. And in the Black community, for some, this way of speaking is oftentimes associated with white people. And people often refer to AAVE as what it means to be talking Black. Now, this accusation carries a lot of baggage. It suggests that speaking in this way, speaking white or talking proper, is in some way a betrayal of your Black identity and being uppity. People are implying or outright saying that speaking this way is you distancing yourself from your Black community and rejecting your Black identity, trying to relate more to white culture. Now, this stereotype may be true for some people. There may be some people that are actively attempting to change their behavior, their interests, the way that they speak to align with whiteness. That is very true. But for a lot of Black people, that is not the case. And I believe that this concept is harmful because it feeds into a harmful narrative that devalues Black intelligence and professionalism. During slavery, oftentimes African Americans were denied access to a proper education that would teach them the standard American English. Over time, this way of speaking became associated with power, privilege, and whiteness. Over time, this educational divide was used to justify the social and economic oppression of Black people in America. And as we mentioned earlier, the concept of respectability politics were perpetuated and encouraged by some Black leaders in the Black community. They suggested to adopt the speech patterns, the dressings, the interest of white society to try to gain respect and acceptance by these people. And while this was a genuine attempt by these people to advance Black people in America, it also inadvertently reinforced the idea that whiteness was the standard for respect and success in this country. If you didn't meet this quota, then you weren't deserving. For many Black people, talking white was a form of code switching and really survival. It was used as a way to navigate through certain educational and social dynamics. For the children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren, etc., of those people that decided to use code switching or respectability politics as a means of advancement or survival for their family, they may not even realize that that is the reason why they speak the way that they speak. They speak like their mom, they speak like their grandma, like their great-grandma. That's all they know. It was a tool passed down from generation to generation to the point where that person may not even know that their great-grandparents were trying to talk white, as people would say. And also, I want to clarify, just because someone speaks in standard American English doesn't mean that they're smarter than somebody who speaks AAVE. And that is a simple fact. And just because someone may talk white doesn't mean that they want to be white or think that they're better than the next Black person that doesn't. Everybody's background and household is different. Oftentimes, we just speak like our parents. We don't know any different. The reality is, language is really a tool. It's fluid, it's adaptable, and it's shaped by our experiences. There's really truly no such thing as talking white or even talking Black. Because we are so diverse and we all come from so many different backgrounds and environments, it is extremely harmful to put us in this tiny box of what it is to be Black and what it is to speak Black, whether it's through AAVE, Standard American English, or any other dialect. They're all valuable ways of speaking.
But if you're still interested, I can throw in a free box of the Oreo cure.
Not one, not two, but three for the price of one.
Come on down and get them, folks. They're almost sold out.
You need to pee!
My bad. I didn't realize we were being all kumbaya. Trying to make some money. Rent is high. The cost of living is high. Dang.
So after all of this talk about Oreos, stereotypes, identity, where does this leave us? At this point, I think we're all in the understanding that calling someone an Oreo is not just a funny throwaway insult. It's a representation about how deep-seated our issues with identity truly are. And the thing about being a Black person is that we are not going to be one size fits all. We're all so vastly different and have so many vastly different interests. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of our interests that are deemed white really originate within the Black community. We just need to do a little bit more research. So if you were a person that called that one weird kid in your class an Oreo, I want you to go log into your Facebook account, find that kid, and apologize. Because they didn't deserve that. And if you were the weird kid that was called an Oreo, I want you to get a pack of Oreos on me. Not on me, because I'm not gonna give you money. But when you buy the Oreos, think about me. Thank you so much for watching until the end. Since you're here, you might as well subscribe. Whichever side. Subscribe. Leave a like. Leave a comment. Maybe hit the notification bell. I mean, you're already here. You made it to the end. If you want more videos like this, go ahead and leave a comment down below on topics you would like me to cover. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Racial categorization.